This is Matthew Putman, and you're listening to Utility Function. The computer scientist and mathematician Alan Turing once said, "We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done." Serge Foguet believes that we can only see a short distance ahead because we underestimate our abilities to predict the future. Today I spoke with Serge. He's the founder of multiple successful tech companies and a good friend of mine. Serge was inspired by sci-fi as a child and is a philosopher entrepreneur himself. He believes that in order to enact enduring change in the world, a person should spend time thinking about the world they want to build and use entrepreneurial drive to make that world a reality. Serge and I agree that we can create infinite resources if we allocate and think about them the right way. We discussed his use of biohacking to increase quality of life, his interest in building decentralized systems to combat institutional control, and the need to create a new set of scientific and social axioms for more compassionate communal collaboration.
Thanks for doing this. It means a
Yeah,
lot to
thanks
me.
for having me. I am excited because I think like throughout our interactions over the last several years, I felt like you were one of the most similar people to me in many ways. And so I'm excited to share some of the thoughts that we're having with your audience because I'm just assuming that they're also people who are similar to us. And it's really cool to get these ideas out and help them affect the world in a positive way.
I agree completely. I think it's interesting that the first conversations, when you bond over something like nanotechnology, as the first way of getting to know someone, it leads down a lot of different paths.
Yeah.
We talked about this Drexlerian dream of the future and how we get there, and you were looking at different paths and some of the same paths, and we start to collaborate. And I didn't even know much about your past. We were talking about the future. I think it's so interesting. You have this business background, but immediately jumped into this understanding of trying to understand yourself, the human body, life in general, and then society. Can you talk a little bit about, how you got into biohacking, for instance, and then we'll get into nanotech.
Sure. So I'll start from afar. I kind of think that I think of myself as a philosopher entrepreneur. The way that in the past they had philosopher kings who were supposed to do good things, and I think that that's like a really important duality for having impact in the world. Because as a philosopher, you kind of know you spend your time thinking about what should be done, and I think an entrepreneur is someone who is one of the few people who can really have an impact in the world. So you can kind of combine these two things. So I was really fascinated somehow about the world we want to build from a very early age. I grew up in a family of mathematicians in Siberia, in the Soviet Union, and we had a lot of science fiction around the house. And I was kind of reading it, and I was just like a little kid, and I was assuming that, hey, we're going to have all this stuff. My expectations about my life is that I'm going to go to the stars, that I'm going to be immortal, that I'm not going to get sick, that we're going to have cool nanotechnology and all of these other things. So it was really cool. By the way, so one of the books that inspired me was The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, and that was the first time I heard about nanotechnology and about our friend Eric Drexler. And so for me, kind of like meeting Eric later on, and Eric introduced us and connected us several years ago, it was kind of like meeting a childhood hero.
I
Uh,
felt the same way.
yeah.
Yeah, I felt that same thing. But when you talk about Diamond Age, though, I find this interesting that in the world of trying to transform the world through business or versus writing about something directly about the future, the way that Eric did with his book Engines of Creation, versus a kind of really intelligent use of it in Diamond Age by Stevenson. But at the same time, he creates this kind of dystopia. Are you worried that the messaging right now is is taking these technologies that you and I are passionate about and turning them into something that is dark?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of my central concerns about the world because it feels like our expectations about reality and about the future tend to shape the future in a way. And this might sound like esoteric mumbo jumbo, but there's like a very good neurobiological reason for it. Is like we expect something, then we tend to notice it in reality as it happens around us, and we act on it. And so, if our expectations of the future are dystopian, then I think it's just more likely that we will get into a dystopia. So this is a very important question. And yeah, I mean, when I read the works of, when we watch Star Trek or read Ian M. Banks or Werner Vinge or Asimov, there's a lot of very positive views of the future, of that we are going to spread around the universe, and we will really like exploit the universe to reach the potential of all humans and really all sentient beings. A very like Buddhist, almost religious concept. And today, people are just assuming that we will fight over scraps because that's what a lot of dystopia is about. It's just like, oh, one group is oppressing another group because there's not enough resources. And I mean, frankly, like if we look at the limits of the laws of physics, just solar panels can power an incredible amount of energy on Earth, and nuclear power can as well. And then, Eric's whole work on nanotechnology kind of credibly explains that really you should be able to take a small cube of carbon and create an incredibly powerful computer out of it in a factory that's the size of maybe a garage or something
The
something.
thing that you're making itself. That's the strange replicator idea. You're actually doing an industrial version of a replicator.
Exactly. So my point there is that essentially, as far as comparing with humanity's access to resources today and what we could have in just 100 years, really just a lifetime of a person, is that we could have effectively infinite resources. And this is just comes from science and engineering. This is not some bullshit utopia. We have access to infinite
Yeah.
resources effectively compared to the capabilities of humanity. And really, what that means is that we are going to, if we allocate these resources in the right way, and if we think the right way, we could actually allow any human to reach their potential in whatever way they want, which could be very, very different. And frankly, it's probably too much down a rabbit hole, but you could design the system in such a way that they wouldn't interfere with each other and wouldn't need to oppress each other for some weird, power dynamics reasons. And we have this potential of this amazing future in front of us, and we're fighting over, like stuff in the present, and much of the stuff we're fighting over is also a self-inflicted wound in a way, because it's really the primary issue is our institutions, which are incredibly disappointing. I mean, like, you just have to. I'm utterly shocked by how disappointing governments are, and even like the only big company I've ever worked at is Google way back, and Google turned from a company that was created by a couple of really fun nerds who wanted to build the future and who seem like super cool people, but the company they created turned into some dystopian nightmare. I mean, it's shocking, like some of the stuff you read about, like the tools they use to monopolize the ad market, and obviously like the surveillance state that they're enabling. It's just like our institutions are failing us. And we have to do something about it, because we're kind of, yes, we have this amazing future that we could get into, that I was just speaking about, but we can also just die. I mean, we could wipe ourselves out in a nuclear war, or an AI accident, or we fuck up the environment and can't save it, or something else. And it's kind of like, the scales that we're looking at is, on the one hand, we have like infinity, godhood, kind of like living until the time that this universe ends, and making it an interesting place to realize our potential and the potential of our descendants. And on the other hand, we go extinct in the near
And
future.
it's almost binary, right? You feel like it's going to happen. One of those two things is going to happen. It's not going. There's no status quo for the future.
That's right. And I think that that's much of where people are making just a mistake, in that people automatically assume that the future is going to be like the past, and extrapolate these trend lines and do all of that stuff, and don't understand the power of exponential growth, don't understand complex systems, which we're interfering with in a serious way by inventing new technology, which has unpredictable feedback loops and all kinds of stuff like that. So I think that people are largely assuming that the future will remain like the present. And I think that that's completely false.
Yeah, I think that you point to and you just said it, but you point to this importance of whether people realize that we live in an abundant society, or if we're or something that is scarce. And we would think of that as false scarcity. And if we have this mentality of thinking that things are scarce, we fight over things and we make the wrong decisions, which sort of brings me to these points of, you could have a philosophical argument about it, you could have religions deal with it, you can have a lot of personal feelings, you could write science fiction, but the other approach is to actually build something and show people that it is possible. And I feel like this is the approach you're taking, and you're doing it in a fairly interesting way. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So and this kind of comes back to the question you previously asked, how I started biohacking. I basically just decided that, since I expect that we're going to understand our bodies and the like, I might as well start right now and start figuring out ways to make myself feel better, whether that's tuning hormones or just taking some metformin to have life extension, potential life extension benefits and the like. And so I just spent several years digging into everything that I could get my hands on, and spoke to people, and then wrote about it. It was very popular. It was one of the most popular Medium articles that entire year. And I kind of just liked learning about how my body works. And then I just keep thinking also about business. I mean, I was very fortunate. I was at Cornell in my undergrad, and this was back in 2004. I think Elon Musk came to Cornell to recruit for SpaceX. And I had the opportunity to have a call with him after that, just really cool, because you meet Elon Musk when you're 18 years old. And that really inspired me, because I was like, so cool. This guy went and built a classic tech company, and now he's building rockets because he wants to do that. I'm going to do that. And a few years later, I managed to build a huge tech company. It's an online travel company, one of the leading B2B online travel companies in the world. It's doing like 50 to 100 million in EBITDA, 2.5 billion plus in turnover. So it's a big company. And I've kind of seen how it came together. And I just realized, okay, I'm going to take the capital I make from that company and invest into new things. And I'm going to start other companies, etc. And one day I was having lunch with Sam Altman, who's a great inspiration. He runs OpenAI now, and I met him a long time ago when we were both 18-year-old kids. And he just kind of said, well, it sounds like you're planning to do things in advance, and kind of like, make more billions of dollars to invest into. But actually, I would advise that you just start doing stuff, because if you build something cool, you're going to have the resources of the world available to you to raise capital for it and to do cool things. I got really inspired by that comment, which I think kind of doesn't turn out to be entirely true. It's actually very difficult to get capital for very out there ideas, and you really have to do it in a different way. Which, I mean, I know that's something that you
Yeah,
think a lot.
no, I realize it's yeah. Any story that can't be told extremely quickly is difficult in the fund, to get
Yeah,
funded for.
yeah,
And I wonder if that is tied actually to the same thing, that if you believe that there is scarcity, then why invest in something that is dedicated towards with the belief that there is abundance. I wonder if the funding environment is shaped by that.
and it's actually irrational for investors, because if you're an investor looking at a power law distribution of outcomes, you need to be betting on the riskiest things. And it's I think that the people really overestimate their ability to predict the future. The future is fundamentally extremely unpredictable. And I personally, in my own thinking about investing and about the companies that I start and the relationships I invest into, I want to bet on people with the highest volatility, frankly, because that's the only way to achieve super normal outcomes, is to just bet on volatility. And it turns out very few people have the balls to bet on risky, crazy sounding stuff, which is very volatile, and people like that. And that's an opportunity, because essentially it's like buying options onto the market where nobody is expecting COVID to happen. And then COVID happens. And I know some people who made like 50, 80x on their options trading strategies, just because they started betting on volatility as soon as this thing started coming out of China. So I think that it's a mistake. It's some kind of cognitive defect. And I suspect that it has to do with conformity. It's just that people are scared, because investors, many of them, I mean, some people like our friend Jan Tallinn is probably an amazing example of an investor who is truly visionary and takes risks and bets on things that are actually very, very interesting. But that's because it's all his own money. And he doesn't have to deal with raised capital and potentially conservative LPs, and who knows, maybe someone has some money from Temasek and they have to write like a thick report that doesn't
And
annoy.
he also speaks beautifully about experience he's had with his children and how he saw the near term future being in danger if we don't do something about it. And that investment strategy is probably shaped by that.
Yes,
And that's it's very touching. And how many times do we hear VCs say something that is touching, that shapes their investment strategy? But how much better they would feel and how much different the world would look if they did.
absolutely. And I think they also just would make more money, and they would stand out. And in a world of celebrity Instagram, Twitter stuff, if you stand out, you're going to be able to raise more money. And essentially, there's not a lot of things in bad publicity. You kind of see, all these guys like Adam Newman, who had a tremendous amount of bad publicity, just goes and raises much more money.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah, but I think there's a nice, just inspiring lesson in that, that you shouldn't be afraid to fail and to be criticized extremely strongly, and the like, because if you keep going and you keep believing in yourself and really focusing on kind of where your intuition takes you, I think you can do amazing things. And a lot of people restrict themselves from doing amazing things just because, I guess, they're scared of failing.
Do you agree then, or do you disagree with Peter Thiel, who says failure is overrated?
Um, I mean, I both. I think that you shouldn't fetishize failure, because you should actually actively avoid failing. I mean, like, you're building something, you should be thinking, how do I make sure this doesn't fail? But I do think that if someone has failed in the past, as long as they have learned from it, and as long as they haven't become demotivated and burned out, they are more capable of doing something else in the future, because failure teaches us a great many things. But you shouldn't aim to fail. There's plenty of failure in life without aiming for it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that statement a lot. That as you know, I am the founder of a company, and I think of it now as there's these big projects. There's the end project. For me, maybe it's the success of the company, or maybe it's the bringing of nanotechnology to the world. Whatever these big things are, and we can't allow ourselves to fail in those big things, even though every single day I will fail at projects and learn from those failures. So there's thousands of more failures, but the whole big project can't be a failure, or why are we doing it in the first place? And you've set things up in a really different way than I've seen, which is this business structure that you've created. And I don't know that this will be interesting to everyone, but it really it deals with this a little bit. It deals with how you combine ideas, and how you have a big end goal. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you're structuring your life and your businesses now?
Sure. So I used to be a CEO, and I've gone through the entire CEO process. And I realized that right now I no longer want to be a CEO, because I just don't enjoy it.
How did you come to that conclusion first before we get?
Um, I think it's just a realization that there's a certain set of things that I'm exceptional at, which is really kind of getting people together, getting capital together, getting people excited, helping people kind of shape the idea, and helping people shape high quality relationships within their executive team, and really help empower the CEO. So I just realized that that is something I'm really good at. And by what I don't think is a coincidence, that is also something I really love doing. And my philosophy is that I am going to focus only on doing the things that I absolutely fucking love doing. And I'm going to delegate everything else. And so as a result, I am just like very obsessively, constantly figuring out how can I delegate. And don't just mean delegate doing something. I try to also delegate the decision making. So, for example, if I'm in an interaction with a CEO, I am really going to make every effort for the CEO to be making the key decisions and for me to follow, because then he's going to be a great CEO. And otherwise, I'm kind of like usurping the limelight. So I think the way I've found this is just I realized that to be truly great at whatever I do, I have to do the stuff that I really love doing. And the job of a CEO entails so many other things that you have to do. And that's an experience that I actually think everyone should go through as part of their life, because it's truly a very educational and interesting.
Wait, so there's some self-actualization here that comes before doing anything structurally with your life, in a sense,
Yeah.
and that it maybe goes back to biohacking, or it goes back to understanding yourself in a way, because I think most of us just don't get it about ourselves. We don't always understand what we're really good at, but we also don't understand that if we're not in the right mind frame for doing those things, we're not going to do them particularly well. I think that's actually really rare, what you're doing and the way that you speak about this. And the journey to that is still something that I would like to understand.
Sure, I can. I mean, I actively seek to understand things better about myself. So, and I spend a lot of time on that. So every morning, I usually meditate for like an hour and go like in pretty deep, intense meditation. In the process of which, I see a lot of creative ideas about the kind of things of the day arising, and then spent a lot of time on psychotherapy and psychedelics, and then I just have I'm very fortunate in that I have an amazing community of close friends who are doing things together. Like we have a whole big camp with art cars at Burning Man, but we also have our own venture capital fund, and we have a bunch of companies together in media and things like that. And it's mostly tech entrepreneur originated, but we also have a lot of artists and other creative people. And I've just been fortunate enough to have a lot of friends from that community who I'm close with and who I can talk about deep, vulnerable things. And that also helps develop this self understanding, plus coaching. I read this great book called The Big Leap, which I highly recommend. It's about, they have this concept that you should find your zone of genius, which happens to be what you would do even if nobody paid you to do it. And you're kind of like the philosophy is to remove everything else, even the things that you're truly excellent at, but that you do not love doing, you should pass away to other people. And there really are very different people in the world. So there are truly people who love doing things that I find really difficult to do, who love, like, I don't know, operational management or something of that kind.
Yeah, it's interesting that you are able to deal with community in this way. It's something I struggle with in some ways. And I guess you're a good facilitator of this. And the other thing that I notice about your work is a certain amount, well, a lot of courage to say things that others wouldn't say. I think that we feel and wouldn't say, and then we're kind of brought into your community from that alone. You mentioned, this popular Medium post that you wrote, but you've done a lot of other writing on this, and it's really courageous. And then combining that with actual business action, I find really interesting. Do you live without that fear, or is it just something that you confront and are able to cope with?
The latter. I mean, like, I'm actually, I have a lot of, or I used to have a lot of fears of a lot of things. And the way to overcome these fears um, is really to confront them and to connect with them. And I've personally found psychedelics the most helpful tool for this, to really understand that, okay, when you're confronting some kind of fear, just look at it, because ultimately, and this is also, I guess, meditation has been the other thing that was very helpful, because meditation teaches us that any feeling that we have is just an object of our minds. And if you objectify your fear and you kind of look at it and say, okay, I have a fear of, you know, not being tall enough, or I have a insecurity kind of thing, or I have a fear of not of being rejected because of something I have done which feels like bad. And it turns out also that a lot of things about how our minds work are extremely counterintuitive. So it feels like the way to overcome fear is to go into the fear and not to run away from the fear. And or the way to really build good relationships with people is not to present yourself as this amazing person, but to acknowledge all of your failures and vulnerabilities and things like that. And I actually think this is a very nice, very powerful hack of reality in a way, because the reason I very courageously say things in my blog posts to the world is that I recognize that people positively react to bravery and to vulnerability. And so it's a really nice hack. It kind of also makes you a better person, I think, when you're not afraid of doing things and acting. And then that kind of connects into what you were asking about, actually acting in the world and building things. So in a way, like thing that Sam Altman suggested to me, kind of to leave what I know, which is mainstream tech, and just go and build a nanotechnology company and try to build a Drexlerian future, that was extremely scary because I suddenly jump into something that I know nothing about. And whenever I have an idea and meet lots of experts and professors from famous universities who will pick me apart, and so it takes not being scared of that and to go into it and to actually act, because if you're not scared of things, there's no reason to not do the things that you want to do and the things that are kind of going to be in the direction of your dreams. But um, I also find the primary things that I'm working on. There's really three things I'm working towards in business right now. One is biotechnology, and that's kind of I just realized that nanotech is truly too early and it's truly too difficult for me, at least. Like, I know you're having some successes, but for me it was just too difficult to figure out the path forward. And through a series of accidents, I ended up building several companies that are all kind of around this central thesis of building up applications that gather a lot of healthcare data and enable healthcare research in the process of doing business. So, for example, one of the companies we're building is basically a high performance clinic focused on most of all on fixing burnout and on making people more productive and energetic and the like. And kind of that's inspired by my biohacking, because I realized that to fix burnout, you have to think about the hormones, you have to think about your sleep, about your psychological state, about many other factors. So it's a multifactorial thing. So you kind of have to go into it with a comprehensive medical view of the kind that I had with Peter Attia, my biohacking doctor. But at the same time, do it in a more scalable way, because Peter just works with like 50 extremely wealthy clients, and I think to build a service that brings that kind of level of high quality medicine to tens of thousands of people, and in the process, you can also gather medical history and de-identify everything, and gather longitudinal blood samples, because in order to work with people, you have to look at their blood results and combine that into a profile, which could be kind of like a commercial biobank, which could be quite powerful for future research. And I know you're joining us as a client,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. This idea of being healthy so that we can build something else, and that means psychologically healthy, physically healthy, emotionally healthy. If we're not, it's really hard to successfully build other things. And you starting with this as a basis, not starting with the final end result of the technology that you're going to create, but making sure that we're all here to be able to create it, I think is fascinating. And that's why I want to be part of this. I also work, Peter Attia was really wonderful to me when I was sick with COVID early on. And I did have this realization that I'm extremely fortunate to be able to email somebody like that and get feedback. But, I didn't have I didn't have all of the information about myself to be able to be comfortable to work through it in the way that I should have been able to. And I think that's what we're going to get through your businesses.
yeah, and so that's one business, and then there's two others which are kind of in a similar vein of being data centric and kind of like building biobank like databases in the process of doing business. And one is doing AI drug discovery, and another one is doing clinical trial recruitment systems. So that's one aspect of my life, and it's really, I think ultimately, I just don't want to grow old and die especially, I don't want to decay. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff about growing old, like wisdom and things like that. But why should your legs be working worse? That's not a thing that we want.
Yeah.
And I've had some health issues like kidney stones and things like that that just made me feel. I mean, come on, it's we would pay any amount of money to not be wheeled around in hospitals in extreme pain. And so it's important that we do this. And this is one of the kind of I'm really pleased actually with the amount of work recently that started going into longevity and life extension work, much better than what was in the past. But this is still an area that I'd love to help. And I think the greatest amount of results from this area is going to come from data driven, large population size approaches, because in the technology world, a large audience is like 100 million people. I had an app that had 30 million downloads. We couldn't even figure out what to do with that as a business. At the same time, in the world of biology, most data sets are pathetic. I mean, like, we're talking about tens to hundreds of people, and at government scale, you start getting to like 10,000 to 100,000 people, but it's extremely bureaucratic and you can't get access to it to do any real breakthrough work rather than just academic research. So, in order to progress along this way, I just want to build data sets like that ourselves and also inspire other people to pursue these approaches. So, that's one area. I think, like, as I've been exploring the biotech industry, I kind of felt that a lot of the issues in it are not issues of science, they're issues of institutions and really underperforming institutions, because you have these large companies that have enormous budgets but that are delivering, like, there's an anti-Moore's law thing happening where every year the cost to deliver a drug to market is becoming more and more expensive, and the
There's
number
something
of
in
drug.
semiconductor industry that is called Rock's law, which is the first investor in Intel said, even while you get these improvements from Moore's law, it will all be exponentially more expensive to build these fabs for production, and that's true now. And you have these $20 billion fabs being built. It's like breaking this for biotech and for technology and semiconductors and all these other things in general might be the biggest goal of all,
Yes.
and it probably ties to your abundance and scarcity comments as well.
Yes, and that's why the second big area that I'm focused on, and we haven't talked much about this because this is more recent, but is Web3. So I think, like, the whole Bitcoin space has shown that there is a solution in decentralization to many issues that are issues of poor institutions. I mean, essentially, like, I would argue that Bitcoin is its greatest power is that it cannot be seized from you and it cannot be inflated away, because inflation is just a stealth tax that all governments in history have succumbed to, because it's the best business model in the world. You just print money, and so they start doing that, and
That's short-term business model, very short-term.
yeah, yeah, it's an incentive trap that humans have been consistently trapped in throughout history, and Bitcoin is the first system that has actually presented something that can solve that trap, and along with many others. I find, actually, so we haven't talked about this much, but I'm Russian/Ukrainian, which made for a very interesting year this year, and I've just seen how, in the chaos of this war, how useful Bitcoin is. And whenever I see people who say like, oh, Bitcoin, that's only like speculation, that doesn't have applications, or like its only application is to evade taxes and evade the law. The only people who say that are people who haven't been on the wrong side of institutions and haven't realized that it's an extremely unfair place to be
Or
in.
don't realize that they are on the wrong side.
Yeah, or don't realize that. But I've seen people who helped their family in Ukraine from Russia without like the Russian government saying like that they're financing terrorism or something like that by using crypto. I've seen Russians who are falsely accused basically of all being Putin supporters because they have a certain password, be able to move their capital across like sanctions which were wrongly aimed at them.
Yeah.
Because like, why do you stop?
Yeah,
Why? It's ridiculous. So the fact that it's not cannot be seized and it cannot be reversed, and that it can be used to evade unfair laws and regulations, that is a feature of Bitcoin, and an extremely powerful one at that. And I think that earlier this year, the thing that got me, over the past year, started hearing this word Web3. And I was like, okay, what is that? And to me, the transformative moment came in May of this year when Vitalik Buterin published this paper on soulbound tokens, which is, I think, like a paper off the level of the original.
just remind the audience who Vitalik is, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Vitalik is the founder of Ethereum, which is the largest cryptocurrency after Bitcoin. And it's not really a cryptocurrency, it's a decentralized computer on which you can build other decentralized applications. So it's essentially Bitcoin. It has very limited functionality, and it was primarily intended as digital gold, not even as a transaction mechanism. And Vitalik created something that is a Turing complete computer that can be programmable and that is capable of building much more complex applications. And what he wrote about is that we can use the principles of blockchain and cryptocurrency to govern ourselves, to create a society, and not just to create a currency, but to create a decentralized society in order to be able to truly control our own data, in order to be able to build decentralized institutions which are not going to gather power in the center, because like that's really the main failure mode of like governments, especially major governments like the American government, the Russian government, or the Chinese government. The main failure mode is that these complex systems become extremely powerful because they hoard power, and then they kind of start protecting their power and not allowing anyone else to be able to reform them. And that's a really problematic issue, because then these institutions become sclerotic and extremely outdated and not capable of executing on the future. But you can't do anything about it because they have the guns. And Vitalik's paper was for the first time convinced me of, is that you can use blockchain to actually replace governments without them being able to truly stop that gradual process. And to me, because of what I've seen in the biospace, that really like the problem is to a great extent of institutional design, not of science and technology. I decided that this is a huge area to allocate time to. Plus, it's frankly, it was I was kind of disappointed with how conservative a lot of people in the biospace
Yeah.
are. And in the Web3 space, people are extremely creative and risk tolerant and the like, which is very nice for innovation. So the first thing I'm building in that space is it's an amazing team that is essentially looking at questions of how to build decentralized identity, which is inspired by Vitalik's paper. And we already have And the central problem with that is that it makes sense, but how do you get people on it? And we have a product that we expect will be able to profitably scale to a very large number of in the millions, tens of millions of users, and that's actually helps with one of the main issues in the Web3 area of kind of getting users into your services in a profitable way, because a lot of people have great ideas about like protocols and platforms that they want to build, and they truly are great. It's incredible the quality of thinking there, but there's not that much thinking about how to build a technology company that makes money and that's capable of profitably getting lots of users, because this kind of comes back to the question of be a philosopher or be an entrepreneur. If you're just a philosopher and you're not an entrepreneur, you're not going to be able to get your philosophy to spread. You kind of have to, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to grow things, you have to deliver value to a lot of people in order for them to join your movement. And I've been fortunate enough in that, like I specifically was very interested in digital marketing for many years, because I was working in this extremely competitive online travel space with big company I mentioned earlier. And so as a result, I kind of know how all of the kind of data and product and marketing and all of that stuff works. And it's really important to bring that into the Web3 world in order to make those things real. So that's the second big block of what I'm spending time on. And
Can I explore this a little bit more and see if we're on the same page of what this could possibly do? I had an experience that was really, I think, representative of how institutions, both government and large pharma, who really ran the COVID response, worked. And it was something that seemed extremely promising. I think getting an mRNA vaccine is sort of a step towards synth-bio in a way that we hadn't seen before, and it was really exciting. I was at a CEO conference, and a CEO of one of the largest companies that worked on these vaccines, and was asked about personalized medicine. And when will this be something that you can deal with these in a personalized way? And he said, we're no longer going down that path.
mm-hmm.
And he realized that it has drifted to the normal pharma institutional way of making money. And, is there a decentralized Web3 version of how biotech could work?
I'm confident that that such a thing does exist. I don't know what it is because I haven't thought about this enough. I think ultimately the problem that we're facing in pharma is risk intolerance and just a failure of vision, because it's very obvious that if you do a risky trial and somebody dies, then you kind of are fucked as a company and as a trial and as a drug. But if you don't do something, and as a result of that, an additional million people dies this year, no one's going to know.
Right.
No one's going to fire you. No, your career is not going to be destroyed. So it's just it's the problem with that is just the general poor risk analysis in our institutions and bad incentive systems, because it really like it's several steps away from game theory and prisoner's dilemma issues, and it's mostly about that. It's about the fact that individual agents in society and society's interests are not aligned, and as a result these individual agents make the wrong choices, well, the right choices for their own career, but society and humanity suffers. And I think that the way to deal with that is decentralization, because if I want to take on a significant risk in my health, I should be able to do that.
Right. There seems like there's this bridge between the biohacking and a transactional way of spreading that, that avoids some of this either bureaucracy or misincentives.
Yeah. Plus, it's the pharma business model, which is ultimately based on regulatory capture. Because essentially, the regulator makes it extremely expensive to do the trials, and then in exchange for that, gives you a monopoly on a small number of blockbuster drugs. So, what that means is essentially the regulatory system and the pharma system have conspired to create negative value for all of humanity, and in the process make a lot more revenues and have a lot more staff on their teams and all of that. And it's not even it's really stupid because we so many people in the world do stuff that doesn't have any positive impact because they're just like sitting in some bureaucratic machine and ultimately like just pushing paper, like completely bullshit jobs.
Really lost the opportunity from, intellectual ability out there, or entrepreneurial ability that doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, that's right. And decentralized systems just allow people to make their own decisions. One of my favorite experiences in life was going to Burning Man. And one of the cool things about it is that you're in the desert and you're kind of like coming up to this, huge art car on top of which this famous DJ is, DJing with topless models and all of that stuff, and you can climb onto it and go like, can I climb onto your stuff with you? And everyone is like, yeah, but just make sure don't go to that side of the art cart because you're gonna burn to death, because there's like a big flamethrower going out of that. And that's like a very mature way of dealing with reality. Frankly, you expect that people are mature agents that are capable of listening and making good decisions, and are not going to sue you because you told them not to skip on the banana peel and they saw it and they still did it. So it's just like that is decentralized systems have a mature attitude towards the individual and do not become paternalistic and overprotective and all that, because it is actually okay that some people die.
Yeah.
It's like been happening for all of human history. It is okay that I have a risk of being killed, even though that I really hope that doesn't happen, and I really want my life extension and all that. But I would fucking hate living in a world that made sure that I definitely did not get killed.
Well, and it seems like the opposite has actually happened. We today, the first thing I read was that life expectancy decreased in the United States pretty dramatically, certainly due to COVID. But it almost seems like almost an institutional desire to keep this going in this way. That you don't have a decentralized way of experimentation. You're stuck with the system you have, and it seems, without looking at this in a different way and having a different risk tolerance on an individual level, we have a societal collapse.
Yeah, I think that the center of this has been best described in Scott Alexander's famous essay, Meditations on Moloch. That there is actually a system which should be thought of as an agent that is creating a great deal of problems in the world, and that creates a great deal of pain, suffering, and all that for humanity. And that system currently controls the world. And in order to progress as a species, we have to get out of that trap and fight back. And frankly, like the only two things that I've seen, which well, I guess three. Like one is if some major disaster happens, like there's an asteroid going towards Earth and it's going to hit in 30 years, and we're all going to die unless we're going to have some major scientific breakthrough. But I mean, like, I kind of like wish that we didn't have to go to that level in order to better ourselves. And the other solution is Web3, because implemented properly, and I think it can be implemented in such a way that it will gradually dissolve the existing governance system of humanity, including the systems that have guns, like governments, and that will happen gradually enough that they're not going to be able to fight back. And I think that that's one part of the solution. Another that I just recently realized is that it's religion. So there are certain things in life which I would argue are sacred. I think like love and kindness and respect and things like that are universally good things. Like I don't know a good claim to saying that there should be less love and too much respect. So sacred, I use that word specifically to mean that it is something that is seems universally good, at least like from a lot of philosophical examination. And uh, religion used to empower these things in the human mind. And but then, as Nietzsche famously said, God is dead, and religion has disappeared. I was actually like recently saw some stat that one of the most definite trends in the U.S. is like reduced falling church going and all that. And I think that religion, at the same time, it has a great many issues which atheists like pointing out, and I completely agree with these issues. And I would argue that it's actually mostly an issue also related to centralization of power. So the fact that if you're a cult leader, it's really easy to go like take lots of money from your followers and like have sex with whoever you want. And then obviously, like the Catholic Church or things like that, governments start co-opting religion. So there's a lot of issues with centralization, which seems kind of like a repeatable trap for humanity. But it almost feels like we need to find some new religion, so something new that we believe in. Like, for example, that we want to build out the galaxy and furtherance of human potential, whatever.
That doesn't feel like a religion to me, though. Religion is based on the concept of belief and faith rather than in evidence and action in some ways. I don't know that these two things are possible to live together.
Maybe. I mean, it's a really complex philosophical question, because we could even argue that science itself, I mean, it does rest on a certain number of axioms, right? And so there's not like a complete like reality grounding, but somehow science seems to be much closer to reality than a lot of other.
Well, and the goal is that you have to get to some type of falsifiability if you're following,
Yeah,
you
yeah, that's
can't,
true.
you can't just accept it. It's still the exploration exists, even if there's some axiomatic beginnings to it.
I wonder if you can, in fact, accept certain things, like that it's good to love other people or something like
I
that.
think
So
that, yeah, interesting. Yeah, 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 yeah. Love is an axiom for society and for the future.
yeah, and I kind of think that we have also become like one of the challenges that seems to recur in human society is that you kind of swing from one side to the other of of a particular spectrum, and that's really why like business cycles happen, because people just swing to skepticism and fear, or to greed and optimism as a society. And I think that we have perhaps swung too far in some ways towards like a purely technocratic view of the world. And it is important, and not to say that there's anything wrong with actually exploring reality and figuring out how it works. I think like that is a thing that we must be doing. But there are some things which are more about like what should we do, And those questions, I'm not sure they're scientifically answerable because they're really they're really philosophical and kind of different in a way.
Well, should we explore it though in a scientific way? I'm not even suggesting that we should necessarily, but is there potentially a scientific explanation for why love should be an axiom?
Maybe I have not been able to arrive at this, but I think that that would be the crux. I think like the crux of the new religion. I think would be of great benefit to humanity is if we somehow manage to merge the scientific worldview and some kind of moral worldview, and have some kind of a moral foundation, and it has to be. I I wish because I think like all organized religions tend to become like trapped in the trappings of the religion and in the institutions, and even the Buddhist religion, which obviously has like much less of a reputation for that, has a lot of issues with it, where they start like constructing these very complex mythologies, which is not actually like where the true insight of Buddhism is. The true insight of Buddhism is that everything happens in the mind, and that if you observe it, then it ceases becoming you. And I don't understand how you go from that logically to like here's the 10 things of the Buddha and all of that. So it feels like the issue is centralization, but if we were able to also have a decentralized religion which kind of brings people to the right conclusions about like love and about kindness and about respect and about the fact that we are one in humanity, and that humans are your brothers, and that you've all appeared from the earth, so the earth is kind of like your mother. So all of those things, like it would be nice if there were some way for people to arrive at these moral conclusions and then not try to dogmatize them on other people, because it's like different people have different words for describing these things, and
Right,
someone
but
might.
but you're starting from the point that they still are axiomatic. They're still the same. There's just different ways of expressing it. So it's not a postmodern view. It's still, even though it's decentralized.
Yes, I think that this particular thing, at least, like, again, I believe that it is axiomatic. And my evidence for this is partly that most people who meditate a lot, or who take psychedelics, or who are philosophers, or who are artists, they kind of start talking about similar things.
Mhm.
Like if you notice, almost everyone talks about love, and also about like being in the present moment and not being too much in your ideas, and things like that. So it feels like there's some kernel of deep reality buried and in there, but I don't I mean, like I don't have the answers. It's just an intuition, and it's almost like I'm not even sure it's possible to have answers around these questions, but it seems important to think about them in order to build a grounding morality, which is important for us to fix our institutions, and to fix ourselves as humanity.
Yeah, I think this actually started to happen with the two of us during the pandemic, even remotely. And I used to, by the way, not think that remote connections could happen in the same way you did. I mean, you run businesses remotely, you do a lot of these things where you're not in person. And I kind of like to be physically near somebody,
Mhm.
especially in times that are as challenging as during some of COVID. But but I think that we were both doing this exploration during the time, and it actually allowed us to be more productive. And it wasn't exactly defining the axioms, but exploring what they could be in some ways, even though we didn't state it that way.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also cool because it's kind of a fun conversation and a developing conversation, and it helped us build up our relationship,
Yeah.
which I think is awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree
Where
completely.
shall we go to next? We can talk about remote.
Well, up
Where
to
would you
you,
like?
man. Up to you. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I mean, I guess since we were on the subject of remote,
Yeah.
it seems like there's a transformation in the world happening towards remote work and
I
remote.
mean, I still hate it personally. So I would love you to convince me how to do this because I do want to connect with people from all over the world. I want to have the type of connection that I have with you, with people everywhere. And I have connections with people in the Middle East right now, for instance. But, you know, I don't, I also come to work every day. I don't work remotely. I mean, I have people around me all day. So yeah, give me an idea of how this could look, and does it involve the creation of the metaverse?
I think that you do have to. I mean, the first point is that you do have to travel because, I mean, like we haven't built our relationship purely
No.
in the online world. We've also had our long walks around Brooklyn and meeting up in San Francisco and all that.
Dinner parties with sort of randomish people that we learn from.
That's right. And the time we met up in London and hung
Oh,
out
that
at
was
Zuma.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. That was fun. So I think it's important to travel, and it's generally a really, really key thing about developing as a person. And I frankly think it's extremely useful for business and for many other things to develop as a person and to um, identify things that you think are fixed but that are actually variable. And this often happens, right? Like when you realize that you had something as a mental model but then it's becomes variable. And I think like one of the interesting ways to find this out is to travel around the world and interact with different people and understand also different cultures. Like for me, it's been really, really useful business wise. The fact that I understand American culture because I've really grown up in Silicon Valley, and I've been somehow. What happened is I just like in my youth came across all of the really cool people in the valley, like Musk or Kevin Hart's or Roloff, who runs Sequoia, and in many respects, like I've learned from them, and so I'm immersed in that culture. But it feels like it's also really cool that I'm immersed in the Russian culture, which is much less trusting of authority, which is much more. Actually, like much more free in certain philosophical ways, and and then it also creates these amazing opportunities to do things. Like I'm capable of raising capital from the best investors in the world in Silicon Valley, and then I'm capable of recruiting engineers in the rest of the world. And like Russian engineers, especially right now, are all over the place because a lot of them have left Russia, and as a result, you kind of like have access to this enormous pool of engineering talent just because you understand that culture as well.
Fascinating. Yeah. The more you travel, the more you realize what kind of person and specialization you need in order to create the types of things that you value.
Yeah, yeah, that plus just seeing just it's also just curious how different people are, and especially like in this whole conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the United States right now, I've just been like seeing how at least like on the Russia and Ukraine side, both sides are suffering. I mean, like it's obvious why Ukraine is suffering because it got invaded, but then you have like I see a lot of my friends who are just unfairly being essentially persecuted with things like the side effects of these sanctions, or the fact that like, oh, you're Russian, we won't open the bank account for you, like that kind of thing has been happening quite a lot. And I think like just by seeing different sides of the same thing and seeing how it affects other people, and obviously like the Ukrainians are in fact suffering more because I mean like it's much worse too.
So if a bomb is coming towards your house,
Yeah, exactly. it was really disturbing because my parents lived in Kiev and they had to flee, and I was kind of thinking about, yeah, this is just it's just really disturbing. But at the same time, in the day-to-day reality of someone who is suffering because their business is getting wrecked for no fault of their own, is also suffering, right? And the amount of suffering that a human can feel, and like, all of us, we feel our own suffering much more acutely than the suffering of others, just because I mean,
Natural.
that's the way it works. But anyway, so I think, like, in terms of remote, like, one part is just that it's really important to have appreciation of different cultures. Like, for example, I one of my big things that I'd like to do is actually spend a bunch of time in China and in Japan and in Asia in general, because I feel like there's a lot to learn there, and the fact that some of what they're doing is kind of seems scary to me is maybe I don't understand it, and I'd like to understand it better. So that's one important aspect of remote. The other is just it seems like it's here to stay. It is reality, because the fact is the technology to do remote work is improving more and more. Plus, the processes are being developed, and the fact is, like, I don't understand why I would ever, at this point, recruit an AI developer in Silicon Valley at a cost of $500,000 or $300,000 or something like that, when exceptionally good people are available around the world at a much lower cost, who are also, frankly, like, more excited about doing the work.
You
And
don't think there's value in being together and collaborating, even if you're paying more for the person?
I think there's definitely value in building relationships, and it's much better to build relationships in person. I completely agree. It's just that even through video, and video is much better than just voice, but even through video, there's just so much stuff that we're not having. Like, how when we meet up, we give each other a hug and we see each other's facial expressions much more, and like the emotional and the body language opens up, and that's what humans need in order to really build deep relationships. And I think, it's going to be a while before we make all of that happen down to the olfactory level or something, because I'm sure that even smells have to do with it. But that's the promise of the metaverse. But really, like, the key thing is that there's just incredibly strong economic pressure for it. And the world is very unequal in a global sense. Like, obviously, like, there's a lot of talk about inequality in the US right now, but globally, the difference in standards of living and incomes is much greater. And so as a result, there's this incredibly valuable arbitrage that you can do by moving more and more service jobs globally around the world. And it's also, like, frankly, less scary to do that, because I mean, like, what if your accountant in the Philippines has to get changed, it's less problematic than if your factory in China has to get changed, because it's all digital. So, but it also brings up a lot of interesting questions, right? About where, like, how are Europe and the United States going to make revenues in the future? Because if the kind of secondary sector, so manufacturing, has been outsourced, and I think, like, I know you're really passionate about bringing it back, but there's a lot of challenges with doing that, like entrenched institutions and regulations, and a lot of issues like that. But if also the services sector gets outsourced, especially at the high end, then where's the economic value going to be created? It seems like the answer is only in technology and in creativity and in really creating new things, which America seems to have a good culture for. And much of the most amazing stuff in the world is still happening in the US. But the big risk is just
Although everything is built in China, though, and in China and Taiwan, we have to acknowledge that in order to improve anywhere. I think right now.
yeah. That's right. That's right. But a lot of the ideas are still created
Yeah.
in the U.S. and it's getting more global and more distributed. And like part of the issue is obviously like the U.S. is has issues with its institutions, and the institutions are seem in fact to be hell bent on attacking innovators and entrepreneurs. And in fact, like killing the golden goose that is seems to be the only really strong source of revenue for the United States in the future. So I'm super curious what is going to happen with that over the next 5 to 10 years. But it seems extremely unpredictable, and it seems like a really unstable system right now.
Well, yeah, I think you really are proposing kind of the first steps of what a new type of globalization will look like. One where you're embracing different cultures, you're embracing talents that come from different areas because of societal reasons. You're realizing that experience in person still matters at this moment, but may change as something like the metaverse arises, as transactions such as use of crypto occur. There is a way to redefine what globalization is, rather than through conflict or standard institutional power mechanisms.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think it's really the path there lies through Web3 in many regards, plus through this transnational community of people who think about these issues. So, kind of the artists and technologists and philosophers and thinkers, and it's something that we just really have to do. We'll be much richer for it, and the key, I think, like the key thing that enables this is communication. Because right now, I mean, like we have very different backgrounds, right? So we were born in completely different societies, and we have completely different life paths, but we have a bond, and that bond is much stronger for me than my bond with someone random in Russia or in Ukraine or something like that. And so our ecosystem and society is becoming truly global and created on the basis of interests, because I'm pretty sure that you and I, we have, again, much more in common with another technology entrepreneur in Tokyo or in Dubai or in Mumbai or in many other places than we do with the people who like pass us in the street. And as a result, like really what we're talking about, this new kind of globalization, is that we have to start in a way taking political action. And what I mean is that there's a certain view of the world that we have, that the world should be more open, the world should be more free, the world should be more decentralized, and the world should be more oriented towards creating a great future for all of humanity, and less about fighting over small gains in status and money today. And we have to actually, so like we've arrived at these philosophical conclusions, and we have to take action, ultimately political action, to change society, and to unite us in this global network of people who are aligned. And that's really the kind of thing that I see as the third big interesting area for me. Is just, I know I'm a really good public speaker, and people enjoy listening to me, and I just like talking about these ideas. And I understand that there's only a very limited amount of stuff that I personally can do. no matter how successful I am. But if I share these ideas with other people, if we share these ideas with other people and have more people join us and feel secure in this kind of global community, the more progress we're going to make. And that's really, like, I think one of the key philosophical things that brings you and I together. Just the fact that we care about this.
Yeah, how do we do this? So how do we enter into, or how do others enter into this world where they aren't trapped by current institutions and ways of doing things? I mean, you created it for yourself in a way. You and I kind of stumbled into each other in a way. How do other people get involved with it?
I think it's it's kind of first of all, it's a little bit like that thing on the plane that put on your air mask first,
Oh,
then attend
yes,
to
yes,
the
yes.
child. So I think that what's important is specifically that you have to kind of get yourself in a healthy psychological state. I think that that's what I mean. First, before you help others, you have to get into a healthy psychological state yourself, and I think that that's been certainly a major project for me and for many other people in our community. Psychotherapy and meditation and all of these other things. Plus, obviously, it's much easier for us to do it because we're more financially independent than many other people who are kind of trapped in a lot of these race mechanisms that we have created. So I think my answer to that is that I want to connect with more people who are in a state of mind where they're ready to do something about this. We can, for lack of a better word, call this elite, but I don't like that word because it's kind of exclusionary. Whereas the objective of this particular group should be to bring everybody into it. And I wish. Actually, I think like that's the objective of any high quality elite. You want to be bringing people into your community and share your ideas and feel happy about it. And that's the way that you change the world. And obviously, like there's more for us and for the people that surround us. I think that we have more responsibility. Frankly, for doing things in the world in this way, and this is why I don't understand. Like, not to, I it's a bit assholish to point out any specific person, but for example, like I don't understand why the Google founders like Larry Page aren't doing more to shape humanity in a good direction, because there's so much resource and power, and at the same time, it seems like philosophical alignment, because it seems like those are really cool guys who know who know what they want the world to be like. So I think that it's important for all of us to act and to do things and to inspire other people and to make other people feel safe in acting. And that's really like the particular piece that I seem to be good at, which is why I like talking about this. I think everybody's role can be quite unique, though, because even though we're very similar people, you and I, Matthew, but we also are different, and there's a different way that you can contribute the most that is going to be unique to you and that nobody except you can truly discover. And I think that that's really like what all of us should be doing, kind of trying to discover our authentic self and what we really love doing, and then applying it to acting in the world. And that will hopefully inspire even more people. If it weren't for the fact that I bumped into Elon Musk all these years ago, maybe I wouldn't have done this, or into Sam Altman. So I'm deeply grateful to them. And I think that maybe that might even be their greatest impact in the world, that they're inspiring heroes who are doing interesting things.
Think that now we're at the point where we would be lucky to have people bump into you. You know, this is, I think, what you've created is this mechanism to be what Elon was to you. And once you show somebody that it is possible, then it's not so theoretical. And I think you're doing this in a way that, even from this conversation, ties together the understanding of oneself, and that, extending to understanding society and the universe, and being able to tie that together to some real action. I'm so happy that you came into my life and seem to be reaching out to so many others.
Thanks. It makes me feel really good. But and I think that part of it, by the way, is also um, kind of one idea I really like is that at some point you kind of have to stop trying to be a hero yourself and be and inspire lots of other people to be heroes.
Do you believe there are heroes? Do you believe in heroes? Is this some because I kind of do, and this is a discussion that's come up so much lately, actually.
Yeah, I do too. I think that the hero's journey seems like a really common story of humanity. I mean, imagine how many scientists have become scientists because of Einstein, who was a very heroic person in a way, or actually Stephen Hawking. That's an amazing heroic example because that's someone who has overcome what all of us absolutely fucking dread of being basically almost paralyzed, and he's managed to contribute much to humanity to such a point that he's like someone who appears in The Simpsons and Family Guy and South Park and all that. So he's part of the popular culture, a hero scientist who manages to do things despite incredible odds. So I think that in that sense, heroes are really powerful. Plus, I think every human wants to be a hero in a way, and to find something that they're amazing at, and to go on this hero's journey, where it's like a classic. You know about the hero's journey concept, right?
Yeah, but please.
It's this idea that there's a recurring motif in human storytelling of someone being in kind of a comfortable position, and something happens and they have to go somewhere and overcome some struggle and almost die and then come back and be better for it and improve humanity. And actually, so this is a good point to talk about another interesting experience I've had lately. So I had an incredibly difficult past year because about a year ago, it was the end of August last year, I was flying from Switzerland to Russia, and I basically forgot some LSD in my luggage, which somehow they have found, and they basically claimed that I was a major drug smuggler.
And this was a small amount, right? I mean, this is
Yeah,
that's the opposite of being a smuggler. You're still going through self-realization and trying
yeah,
to.
yeah. It was several tabs plus some prescription meds from the U.S. and they made a huge deal out of it and threw me in prison for a month and threatened me that they're gonna put me away for 10 to 20 years, and it was just incredibly shocking. It was like a ridiculously shocking experience because you kind of go from this Swiss castle to being next to a person in like a dirty prison who's there for murder, and for some reason murder gets like much less punishment under Russian law than several tabs of acid. So and it was just incredibly scary, but somehow I kind of I adapted relatively quickly. I just started meditating. Plus, I had a ton of support from a lot of my friends, and but it was a difficult experience. It's also I'm quite well known in the technology community in Russia, and it was in the local equivalent of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and on TV and all of that. So it was shocking. And then I was like sitting with house arrest, like with an ankle monitor for 7 months. 7 months. That I mean, like it's I got out of it because in the end, with a lot of legal work, frankly, there's they kind of had to admit that it wasn't a ridiculous quantity of LSD which I intended to sell, and saw prescriptions for my meds and things like that. So but it was a bureaucratic process that was extremely unpleasant and just scary, because I was kind of in this situation where I could be put away in prison for many years, and so it got resolved in a positive way. But that was like a harrowing experience, and throughout the process, like at first, I was just really fucking scared to the point of suicidal, just because I mean, like
Yeah.
you get into this. I mean,
You could have done 20 years you could have done 20
yeah.
years in prison. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and just the immediate environment is extremely shocking, because I mean, like you're in this like metal van, cage on wheels, like having to pee into a plastic bottle because they're not going to let you out, and like surrounded by people who were there for murder and stuff like that. So it was really scary. After that, after it kind of became obvious that there everybody understands that this is a vast exaggeration. So it was kind of then a lengthy process of psychological adaptation, because I was depressed when I was on house arrest, and it was just depressing. Like I couldn't get any work done for the first couple months because I just didn't have the energy. I just like woke up in the morning and felt like shit, and couldn't exit my apartment. And somehow, I mean, I got a lot of support from friends. Like there would be like people would organize a party at my house every night and come over and hang out with me and all that. Plus, a lot of like my business partners have picked up the slack, for which I'm really grateful to them. That was like an extreme example in delegation, right? Because you can't do anything if you're in prison for a month. So everybody else has to pick up the slack. And then it was just like, yeah, I spent a lot of time with psychotherapists and all that. And in the end, it was, I'm really glad that that experience happened, even though this all happened over the past year. And I'm really glad that it happened, because in the process, I went through extreme stress and realized, like, saw that, no matter what happens, I'm going to survive. No matter, I have a lot of people I can rely on who love me and who I love around me. So that was amazing. Plus, it was just very. I mean, it was very educational in a way, because I'm in this fortunate position where I, spent all my formative years hanging out and like bumping into Elon Musk, or hanging out with people like you or Eric Drexler. And I kind of have always been looking up and saying, I have to beat Elon Musk. That's like the standard to beat in terms of impact, as opposed to looking at that there's an enormous part of society which is kind of at the bottom of this social pyramid, like people in prison.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Did you about your fellow inmates? I mean, you're talking about this life where you're bumping into sort of elite technologists. You're spending time with people who are creative, who care deeply about you, and we've been talking about how you open up this new world of decentralized progress and access to abundance. an extreme of those that are in bad situations that aren't able to participate are people that are in prison. Did you have any experience with inmates that could inform your view on the world?
Yes, absolutely. I felt that they were really nice, good people. Like, so I interacted with people. At no point did I feel like threatened by anybody. Like, people, it felt a bit like Burning Man. Like, people shared stuff with each other. Like, we would have, there was a way to get food in, and like when I would get food, we would like take Snickers bars and cut them up for everybody. And like when you get into the place and you're new, the people from cells around you figure out ways to like send you coffee
Beautiful,
and
man.
stuff like that.
It's so
So
beautiful, man.
that was cool. Plus, I mean, frankly, a lot of people were there for reasons that don't feel just to me at all, like either things that feel like stupid mistakes, or frankly being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, yeah, killing someone is different, and there's obviously a category of people who did something horrible, but very few of them. Actually, most people were there for drug related offenses. And the most egregious person is like he was driving a car, like one of those car sharing cars, with his wife, with like his wife's account, and they classed it as that he stole the car and went. So it's really stupid things like that, and it was really shocking to me how, because I was getting a ridiculous number of letters every day from my friends. I have like several kilograms of handwritten, like slash printed out letters that were delivered in paper to my cell. But there were people there who I gave my clothes to because they didn't have any clothes and they didn't have anybody on the outside who could help them. And like the guy with the car sharing service, if he had a good lawyer, he would be able to not go to prison. And so it was just the fact that like some people have money and some people don't have money and don't have friends. It's like money isn't even that important. What gives you security is the fact that you have people around you who support you, who form this support network, your family and your friends and your colleagues and all that. And I was just shocked to see that there are people who have nothing, like nothing. And also just the whole incarceration system was set up in a really stupid way, in the sense that like for example, you could not get educational materials delivered. So
Mm,
like for example,
yeah.
so people are spending years sitting on their ass doing nothing, just being bored and in a cell. So you might as well like have these people learn English or learn to program, because then they come outside, they become much more integrated into society and much more useful for the local tax base, if we want to be like that transactional. And none of this was happening. It was just about punishment, which is like I think a very weird philosophical
Yeah.
concept, because people are so extremely affected by their environment that believing that there is something fundamentally bad and that deserves to be punished, I think that that is an untenable moral view.
Yeah, and how you psychologically deal with that, whether you're in or once you're out. I have this friend. I'm involved with an organization called Silent Cry, and this woman, Shwana Vaughn, who is, I think, the most courageous, incredible woman who was incarcerated for 7 years, and has this organization to deal with what she's called post-traumatic prison disorder.
Hmm.
And she was, and this may be a cue to all to us. She said that just yesterday when I was speaking to her, that what you need to make change in the system is you need people with power, you need people with influence, and you need money. And there's a Venn diagram of these things.
Hmm.
But we, all of us that are on the outside, no matter what trauma we suffer from, we do this kind of biohacking, understanding ourselves, doing everything from meditation to psychedelics, all the things you've spoken of. But figuring out where we sit in this power, influence, or money, and finding those that can make a difference, that might be something that in a decentralized world we can actually start to change the system.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's also connected to that we kind of want people to have challenging experiences. I mean, we don't necessarily, I'm not saying everyone should be in
Mhm.
prison,
No, you're right.
but we do want to have challenging experiences because through them we grow. Plus, we become more compassionate. Because I definitely used to have, in my mid 20s, I used to have the view that if you're not a millionaire, you're kind of an idiot because you just haven't figured it out. And I figured it out. I'm a millionaire. So that kind of like egoic viewpoint, and then you kind of see just how fortunate you are that how much you absorb from your environment. Because I mean, I went to Stanford Business School, and it was the biggest thing that it gave me was the fact that you would constantly have people like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Steve Ballmer show up, and you could talk to them, hang out with them, and kind of feel like, okay, these are just regular people, just like me.
Hmm.
So I have all the capability, and I can just do that. And that realization is incredibly valuable because it's actually a self fulfilling prophecy. If you are going to expect great things from yourself and seek that in the reality around you, you're just going to notice more opportunities to do that, plus have less fear because you've seen those people and they didn't look like anything, like they were not gods or a completely different species of humans. And it's very fortunate that I've had that experience. And obviously, very few people can have that because there's very few places at Stanford Business School. So I think that we have to recognize the importance of we could call it luck, but really something, just the context in which you've been placed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could go on forever talking to you as we continue a conversation. People may not have this in their life. I feel really lucky. We sort of continue a conversation on a weekly basis whenever possible to see where this goes, and I love that, and I love that we are able to share some of that today. So, I mean, thank you so much, Serge, for doing this. It means a lot to me.
Thank you, Matthew, and I really appreciate you inviting me. And could I just say a few words
You
at
can say
the
whatever
end?
you'd like, of course.
I just want to encourage everybody who's listening to this to think about, whether they get inspired by anything amongst like what Matthew and I were discussing. And if you do feel inspired, then try to do something with it. It's like one of the things I have adapted in my life is that whenever I have an impulse to do something, I do it immediately. And especially if it's connected to reaching out to somebody. So I'll often message you, for example. That's just because I could be meditating and the thought of something related to Matthew appears, and I'm like, I should ping Matthew about this. And so I think if you find that any of this resonates, reach out to us and also do something that you feel passionate
Yeah, reach
about.
out to us.
Yeah,
Let's all join this conversation.
yeah, that's right. And like I think Matthew, both you and I, we both want more of this to happen in the world, and we're actually like taking active steps towards doing it through building companies and through like we haven't talked much about you, but
Well,
I
that's
think
okay.
like for well, well for those who don't know it. I think that you are building an amazingly interesting company, very transformative company in the space of nanotechnology. Plus, at the same time, you're organizing this cool Pioneer Works thing in New York, which brings together really interesting speakers and scientists and artists, and that's really cool. And I like how we're both looking for ways to impact people around us and to bring them into this community of people who want to make the future better. So let's do it together.
Thanks, Serge. I'm looking forward to doing more together. I really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you. This was amazing.